The moment I opened the hotel room door and saw the single bed, I realized the company retreat had not been designed to build teamwork, it had been designed to expose every crack in the armor I had spent 3 years wearing. Standing behind me was the one person at Hartwell Creative who seemed to enjoy watching me fail, and when I turned to face her, expecting an argument, a complaint, or one of her sharp little smiles, Claire Whitmore simply folded her arms and said, "One bed. Don't make it awkward." What she could not have known was that I had already seen the folded medical letter slipping from her tote bag, or that before the day was over, I would learn the truth about the woman I had hated and the truth about myself. Before I tell you what happened, please take a moment to like, comment, share, and subscribe to our channel if you believe in kindness, forgiveness, hope, and second chances. Your support helps our family continue sharing stories that remind us how quickly judgment can separate people, and how one honest moment can bring them back together. My name is Graham Beckett, and for nearly 3 years, Claire had been my rival in everything except job title. We were both senior project managers at a fast-growing advertising company in Boston, both competing for the same promotion, both stubborn enough to work through lunch, and both convinced the other person was the reason the office felt like a battlefield. Claire was controlled, precise, and frighteningly prepared. She could walk into a meeting with 30 pages of research, challenge a director without raising her voice, and somehow make silence feel like a verdict. I was more instinctive. I built relationships quickly, trusted ideas before spreadsheets, and believed good work should still have a pulse. Our conflict began during my first major campaign, when Claire publicly pointed out a flaw in my budget projection. She had been right, but the way she did it calmly, in front of the executive team, made me feel humiliated. 2 months later, I presented an idea before she was ready and received credit for a concept she believed she had helped shape. From that point forward, every meeting became a contest. Every compliment one of us received felt like an insult to the other. People stopped sitting between us at the conference table. New employees were quietly warned not to mention one of us in front of the other. Even our boss, Mary Ann Holt, had begun describing our partnership as productive tension, though everyone knew it had become something much more exhausting. The team-building retreat was held at a quiet lakeside lodge outside the city, surrounded by pine trees, bright green lawns, and walking trails washed in warm spring sunlight. Everything was scheduled during the daytime: trust exercises in the morning, problem-solving competitions after lunch, and a final presentation before everyone returned home the following afternoon. The room-sharing arrangement had been planned to encourage employees from different departments to connect, but an apparent booking error left Claire and me assigned to the same room. The front desk clerk apologized and explained that a wedding party had filled every remaining room. Claire did not react beyond tightening her jaw. I offered to sleep in the lobby, but the lodge manager said fire regulations prohibited guests from using the common area overnight. Claire placed her bag beside the desk, stared at the bed, and repeated that I should not make it awkward. I told her I would take the floor. She said the company needed both of us functioning for the next day's exercises and that neither of us would perform well after sleeping on hardwood. Her tone was practical, almost cold, but there was a weakness in her face I had never seen before. She looked pale. Her hands trembled slightly as she removed her jacket, and when she bent to lift her bag, she stopped suddenly as though a sharp pain had passed through her side that I pretended not to notice, partly because I assumed she would consider concern another form of competition. We changed the subject and went outside for the opening exercise, where teams were asked to construct a bridge from rope, wooden planks, and plastic crates. Mary Ann deliberately placed Claire and me on opposite teams. Under the bright late-morning sun, the entire company watched as we turned a simple challenge into war. Claire organized her group with military precision, assigning tasks based on skill and measuring every gap. I encouraged improvisation and speed. Her bridge looked perfect but took too long to complete. Mine was finished first but collapsed under the weight test. When Claire's team won, she did not celebrate. She simply looked at me across the lawn, and for the first time, I noticed not triumph but fatigue. During lunch, she barely touched her food. While the others laughed about my failed bridge, Claire excused herself and walked toward the garden path alone. A few minutes later, I found the medical letter beneath her chair. I had no intention of reading it, but the first line was visible through the partially opened fold. It mentioned an oncology department and a follow-up procedure scheduled for the next week. My first reaction was disbelief. Claire was 34, athletic, disciplined, and seemingly indestructible. Illness did not fit the image I had built of her. I placed the letter in my pocket and followed the path until I found her standing near the lake, one hand pressed against the railing of a small wooden overlook. Sunlight shimmered across the water, and families in canoes drifted peacefully in the distance. Claire's shoulders rose and fell as if she had been running, though the path had been short. When I told her she had dropped something, she turned, saw the envelope, and went completely still. She snatched it from my hand and accused me of reading it. I said I had only seen the hospital heading. Her expression hardened immediately. She warned me not to tell anyone, especially Marianne. I asked if she was all right, and Claire gave a bitter laugh that sounded nothing like the woman who controlled every room she entered. She said she was waiting for results after doctors removed a suspicious growth. She had not told her family, her friends, or anyone at work because she could not bear being watched with sympathy. She had already spent most of her childhood watching people pity her mother, who had died after years of illness. Claire had promised herself she would never become the fragile person in the room. I should have responded with compassion. Instead, years of resentment reached my mouth before empathy reached my heart. I asked whether that was why she had been so ruthless about the promotion, as if illness explained her ambition or excused the way she treated me. Claire's eyes filled, but her voice remained controlled. She said the promotion mattered because it came with better health coverage and enough money to help her younger sister, whose husband had recently lost his job. She had not wanted special treatment. She had simply wanted stability before the results arrived. Then she said something that cut through every excuse I had made about our rivalry. You think I wake up every morning planning how to defeat you, Graham. Most mornings, I am only trying not to fall apart. She walked back toward the lodge before I could answer. I remained at the lake, ashamed of how easily I had interpreted another person's fear as arrogance. For 3 years, I had treated every sharp word as proof of cruelty and every success as an attack. I had never once considered that Claire's armor might not have been built for me at all. The afternoon challenge required pairs to navigate a wooded obstacle course while one person wore a blindfold and the other gave directions. Marianne announced the pairings, and whether by coincidence or design, Claire and I were assigned together. Several co-workers exchanged nervous looks. Claire tied the blindfold around her eyes and told me to guide her. I expected resistance, but she followed every instruction. I warned her about roots, low branches, and uneven stones. Halfway through the course, she became unsteady. Her breathing shortened, and when she stepped from a wooden platform, her knees buckled. I caught her before she hit the ground. For a second, she gripped my shoulders with both hands, no longer composed, no longer distant, simply afraid. She whispered that she was dizzy. I removed the blindfold and called for help, ignoring her protest. The facilitator brought water and a chair while the others gathered nearby. Claire insisted she had skipped breakfast and needed only a moment. I supported her arm as we walked back to the lodge. No one laughed. No one made jokes about our rivalry. For once, the competition disappeared, replaced by the simple fact that one human being needed another. Back in the room, sunlight streamed through the wide windows and fell across the single bed that had seemed so threatening earlier. Claire sat on the edge while I brought her water and crackers from the lobby. She looked embarrassed and said she hated that everyone had seen her weak. I told her they had not seen weakness, they had seen someone push herself too far. She asked why I cared after everything we had done to each other. The question forced me to admit a truth I had avoided for years. My anger toward Claire had never been entirely about her. Before joining Hartwell Creative, I had worked at a smaller agency where a manager took credit for my ideas and blamed me when projects failed. By the time I met Claire, I had become prepared to defend myself against humiliation. Her criticism during my first campaign reopened that old wound, and instead of separating her honesty from my former manager's betrayal, I made her responsible for both. I confessed that I had sometimes withheld information from her, challenged her in meetings simply to undermine her confidence, and celebrated privately when her proposals were rejected. Claire stared at the floor, then admitted she had done similar things. She had reviewed my work more harshly than anyone else's. She had delayed approving one of my budgets because she wanted me to miss a deadline. She had convinced herself that defeating me was the same as protecting her future. There was no dramatic embrace and no immediate absolution. Forgiveness rarely arrives like a lightning strike. It came slowly, in uncomfortable admissions and long pauses, while afternoon light moved across the carpet. Claire told me she had respected my creativity from the beginning, which was precisely why I threatened her. I told her I had admired her discipline, though I often mocked it because I could not match it. We began to see that our rivalry had survived because each of us secretly believed the other possessed something we lacked. Claire had certainty where I had instinct. I had warmth where she had control. Together, those differences could have made us an extraordinary team, but pride had turned them into weapons. She apologized for humiliating me in that first meeting. I apologized for taking credit before she was ready to present our shared idea. Neither apology erased the damage, but both gave it a name. For the first time, our history felt less like a permanent sentence and more like something we could choose not to repeat. Later that afternoon, Marianne knocked on the door and asked whether Claire needed to leave the retreat. Claire glanced at me before answering. I could see the fear that her medical situation might affect the promotion. Before she could invent another excuse, I told Marianne only that Claire had become dehydrated and needed rest, carefully protecting the secret she had trusted me not to reveal. Marianne accepted the explanation and then surprised us by saying the final presentation had been changed. Instead of competing individually, employees would work in pairs to propose a campaign for a nonprofit supporting families facing serious illness. Claire and I looked at each other. The topic felt painfully close, but it also offered a chance to transform what had happened between us into something useful. Claire said she wanted to participate. I asked whether she was sure. She answered that she did not want fear making every decision for her. We spent the rest of the daylight hours working at the small desk beside the window, our laptops open, papers spread between us, and the one bed behind us forgotten. The next morning, bright sunlight filled the conference room as each pair presented. Claire and I called our campaign more than the diagnosis. The idea focused not on illness as tragedy, but on the full humanity of the people experiencing it: their work, humor, responsibilities, dreams, and relationships. Claire developed the structure and research. I created the emotional narrative. Instead of interrupting each other, we built on each other's words. When I lost my place, she guided me back without making me feel small. When her voice trembled during the final section, I stepped closer and continued until she was ready. Our colleagues listened in complete silence. We ended by explaining that people often hide pain because they fear being reduced to it, and that real support begins by seeing the person before the problem. We never revealed Claire's situation, but every word carried the truth of what we had learned. When we finished, Marianne wiped tears from her eyes. The room rose in applause, not because the campaign was clever, but because it felt honest. After the presentations, Marianne asked Claire and me to walk with her through the sunlit garden. She told us the executive team had originally intended to choose one of us for the promotion, but our presentation had revealed a larger problem. The department did not need another individual star. It needed leaders who could combine strategy and creativity without destroying each other. Marianne offered Claire the role of Director of Operations and asked me to become Director of Creative Strategy, with equal authority over different sides of the department. Months earlier, I would have measured the titles, compared the salaries, and searched for evidence that Claire had won more than I had. Instead, I looked at her and saw relief, gratitude, and fear all at once. She accepted only after Marianne assured her that the company's health plan would begin immediately and that medical leave would be protected. I accepted because, for the first time, the opportunity did not feel like victory over someone else. It felt like a chance to build something with them. Claire's test results arrived the following week. The growth had been malignant, but doctors had found it early, and treatment began before it spread. She finally told her sister, then her closest friends, and eventually the team. People did not treat her as fragile. They organized rides, covered meetings, delivered meals, and respected the days when she wanted privacy. I attended several appointments with her when her sister could not leave work. Our relationship never became the office romance people jokingly predicted after the retreat. What grew between us was quieter and, in some ways, deeper trust. She taught me that honesty did not have to be humiliating. I taught her that accepting help did not erase strength. A year later, Claire returned from her final treatment and walked into the office beneath a banner the team had made. She looked healthier, though changed, and I realized I no longer remembered exactly why I had once hated her. I remembered the arguments, but the anger had lost its power. On the anniversary of the retreat, Claire placed a framed photograph on my desk. It showed the two of us during the final presentation, standing side by side in morning sunlight. Beneath it, she had written a single sentence: "Thank you for not making it awkward." I laughed until my eyes filled, because we both knew she was not referring to the room or the bed. She meant thank you for not turning her fear into gossip, her illness into weakness, or her apology into another competition. I gave her a card in return. Inside, I wrote that rivals are sometimes people who resemble us closely enough to expose the parts of ourselves we are avoiding. We do not always need to defeat them. Sometimes we need to listen long enough to understand why the battle began. Before this story ends, leave a meaningful comment about a time when understanding someone's hidden struggle changed the way you saw them. Your words may help another person choose compassion before judgment, or forgiveness before pride. If this story touched your heart, please like this video, leave a meaningful comment, share it with someone who needs hope today, and subscribe to our channel so you never miss another emotional journey. Claire and I entered that lodge believing there was room for only one of us to succeed. We left understanding that the smallest room can hold more than one ambition, more than one fear, and more than one wounded heart. The single bed was never the real problem. The real problem was the invisible distance we had placed between us, built from old pain, silent assumptions, and years of refusing to see the person behind the rival. Once we finally crossed that distance, neither of us lost. We both became stronger, not because we defeated each other, but because we stopped trying. And in the clear light of day, with nothing left to hide behind, two enemies discovered that forgiveness was not surrender. It was the first honest victory either of them had ever shared.